I have this reoccurring nightmare, and it's not very pragmatic. It's more of an emotion. It's just like horror overcomes me of these real events that I lived through. But when I get to the casualties, it's my son that's mutilated. You know, I get to men and they're mutilated, and I'm attempting to salvage their lives, and they're dying literally in my arms, and we're in hand-to-hand fighting, and we're calling airstrikes on our own position to martyr ourselves for the greater good. And you are very much so functioning as if you're already dead, and you basically are just making decisions on not making it worse. The decisions that you're making, you're living every 3 seconds as if it's just your life. Like every 3 seconds, okay, I'm still alive. What can I do to make it better? That's the only questions that you're asking yourself, you know. Special operations guys in general are trained and indoctrinated to believe in themselves and to believe in their actions and to believe that they can save everyone, that they can make things right through their efforts. To have men die in your arms, you know, in the middle of surreal combat, and people don't die peacefully. It's a very horrible thing to have people dying of mutilating trauma. It's a very horrible thing to attempt to shoulder that responsibility and fail them. You can't help but implicate yourself in that death. And you can say, well, yeah, I mean, he was ripped in half, or he's missing the back of his, you know, his head, or, you know, these are wounds that are non-survivable, but they still die horribly in your arms. And consciously you can say, yeah, man, I mean, I was compassionate, I did everything I could, but subconsciously you were forever implicated in that death, you know. And combat is not straightforward. It's not like you see people, you shoot them, they die, and then we win, and then I chum it up with my buddies. It's a ebb and flow of horror in logistics as those things are taking place. Like, it's not a straightforward thing. It's not like it's not a football game. There's not winners or losers. It's a surge and a retraction, you know. The difference between courage and desperation are one and the same. But it's just such the ultimate test of humanity, and it's definitely one of the things that proliferates it, and it will proliferate it, you know, forever. Whether or not you want to believe it, if you want to be a pacifist, well, then the enemies of this country, or whatever they feel you are, they're going to kill you and produce a stronger race. When you're really at that business end of freedom, when you're on the user end of that meat grinder, all you have is horror and grief, and you don't want to inoculate someone to that. Everybody wants to be the man till you're the man. A particular situation that was my most surreal combat exposure was Operation Bulldog Bite, where, you know, a platoon was being overrun on the border of Pakistan up in the Waterpur Valley, and we chose to hoist into a site that was getting overrun with multiple deaths and casualties. Imagine flying a helicopter to hoist people into a firefight, and you're going to hold a hover. You know, hold that helicopter into a hover 40 feet above the hell that's going on beneath that aircraft, and you're going to hold that as your aircraft is getting riddled with machine gun fire. Guys missing their arms, dragging their dead buddies to you under fire. Men begging for their lives, men out of their minds with panic and sheer horror. As bad as it can get, you know. Equipment will fail you in combat. Technology, firepower, communication devices, resources will fail you in life and in situations, but the only thing that of value in that realm is your resolve and your intentions. You know, resolve and intentions solve horrible circumstances. You know, to have witnessed them die, or, you know, the actions that they were taking out of desperation, you know. And then 5 minutes later, you might be dragging them on their face down the side of a cliff, you know. Where we have made it part of our policy, part of our, you know, subculture to do those things, you know. So it reduces the amount of grief that they inherit, you know. I'm going to stop for a sec, you know. When people have died on me, I've touched their face, and I've just, even in the midst of horror in combat, I've touched them in the face and just said, you know, like a thank you to them. Or whether tears were streaming down my cheeks in the middle of all this, I would just give a moment to recognize their life. You know, it seems really simple, you know, but we live in such a cynical, removed world, specifically in Western culture, that this almost seems bizarre, you know, that would happen when things pass, that you would just thank them. Yeah, to honor death, it makes it okay to deface those remains or to mutilate those remains in an effort to salvage more life. One of the things that becomes up more and more with the men that I work with is people having psychological problems after doing our job, particularly rough handling corpse. You know, we call these guys heroes, men that have died in combat. And when we go to get these guys, it's not like this pristine environment. Like, we're usually in the middle of a firefight when we're getting these men. And so it's like you're in your own fight or flight when you're doing this. And what I mean by rough handling is either mutilating them further to get what we can out of wreckage or situations. You have to disfigure them to just salvage their body. And it's horrible to do that as an occupation. That's a horrible thing to even begin to try to articulate. And unfortunately, that's a large part of our position and our role and responsibility that we deal with. Like, horror can kind of overcome you. In those moments, it's just, you're stuck in the moment to moment of it, you know. I guess like a horrible analogy would be maybe a rape victim that's just passively in a third person observing it, you know. It's taken me a very long time to understand that the protective mechanisms that allowed me to survive and be productive or efficient in that atmosphere that I cultivated over 25 years to attempt to perform under those circumstances have isolated me from myself and my family. It has made me very unwilling to accept mercy, love, or grace for myself. The same force that allows a flower to bloom, you know, is the same cosmic force that is making me articulate these words to you. We are here for a fraction of time. You know, the samurai believed that your life should be fleeting and beautiful. You know, and when cherry blossoms bloom, it's very fleeting and very beautiful. What is that? Twice as bright, half as long. You know, I think the more that we experience, you know, the lessons of this world, the more that we can reflect their beauty or their horror, you know, and when it's all really just one and the same thing. Through my experiences, I've absorbed a lot of damage, you know, and I feel beyond lucky to, you know, get to articulate my experiences. And to think that, you know, as I lose my faculties as I get older, I feel a huge responsibility to articulate the things that I'm capable of now. And so I feel very strongly to do so, you know, not only through the way that I can articulate a story and the honesty that I feel responsible to portray, but also visually. I've gotten involved in tattooing and art and all these things as this beautiful way to express myself, a beautiful way to express some of these things that I cannot articulate. I do so as much as possible. You know, I try to be as sincere as possible. I try to be as honest as possible, you know, with myself and with the people in my life, you know, the things that I might represent to other people, you know. I think tenderness comes from pain. When people want to help other people, it's because they themselves have experienced pain. It's a way of catharsis for them. It's a very subconscious thing, you know, and there's no recipe, there was no conscious design in any of this. There's more to serendipity and synchronicity than we can articulate. It's like you inherit a certain responsibility to communicate that. as well. Not only for the events that took place or maybe people that died, but also for your own perspective and healing. But I do feel very compelled to speak some of the truths in my heart.